Risk tolerance feels personal. It feels like a stable trait, something embedded in temperament. Some people are cautious, some people are bold. The difference appears psychological. But perceived comfort with risk is quietly shaped by past constraints and current dependencies. What you call risk tolerance is often just adaptation. It is a behavioral posture formed under pressure. It reflects what your environment once required for survival. If you grew up in instability, unpredictability becomes normal. Volatility does not feel threatening because it is familiar. Stability, by contrast, can feel unnatural. If you grew up in security, disruption feels dangerous. Loss registers more intensely because it violates expectation. Preservation becomes the default stance. Neither reaction is purely chosen. Both are patterned responses to prior conditions. The body and mind calibrate to what they repeatedly experienced. Over time, that calibration hardens. It begins to feel like identity. You stop noticing that it was shaped. This is why two people can evaluate the same opportunity and feel entirely different levels of discomfort. The numbers may be identical. The internal response is not. Risk tolerance is not calculated in isolation. It is filtered through memory. Past constraints quietly set the boundaries of what feels acceptable. Constraints leave impressions long after they disappear. Scarcity, instability, dependency, and uncertainty create internal guardrails. Those guardrails remain even when circumstances improve. The mind does not instantly update to new conditions. It references what once threatened security. It assumes similar outcomes could return. What feels like prudence may simply be residue. What feels like courage may be habituation. Both are echoes of prior environments. Current dependencies reinforce the pattern. When others rely on you, optionality narrows. When obligations accumulate, experimentation contracts. Responsibility alters perception. The same volatility that once felt manageable begins to feel reckless. The stakes are no longer abstract. Income sources, lifestyle costs, and social expectations all feed into this perception. They create an invisible web of consequences. The web tightens risk thresholds without announcing itself. You interpret the tightening as maturity. You call it wisdom. In reality, dependency has recalibrated your comfort zone. The reverse can also occur. When obligations are minimal, risk appears cheaper. Downsides feel survivable because fewer systems would be disrupted. That perceived bravery is often structural. It is enabled by fewer attachments. Remove the structure, and the tolerance shifts. This is why risk tolerance changes across life stages. It appears like personal growth or decline. It is usually a change in constraints. Add a mortgage, a family, or reputational capital, and volatility feels heavier. Remove them, and the same volatility feels lighter. The internal narrative rarely acknowledges this. It frames the shift as personality. It rarely names the dependencies doing the shaping. Even financial success can distort perception. Accumulated assets reduce immediate threat. That reduction can expand apparent tolerance. But even that expansion is conditional. It exists because buffers exist. Remove the buffers, and the tolerance compresses again. At no point is the comfort level purely internal. It is always interacting with structure. Past and present contexts quietly collaborate. This collaboration is subtle. It operates below conscious awareness. You experience the output, not the mechanism. When you say, "I'm just not comfortable with that level of risk," you are reporting a sensation. You are not identifying its origin. The origin sits in earlier constraints that trained you to avoid certain exposures. It sits in present dependencies that would magnify specific losses. Risk tolerance, therefore, becomes situational rather than fixed. It is dynamic, not innate. It adjusts as constraints expand or contract. Yet the mind prefers stability in self-image. It prefers to believe traits are consistent. That belief preserves coherence. Calling risk tolerance a trait simplifies decision-making. It removes the need to examine underlying pressures. It avoids confronting dependency. But the pressures remain active, whether acknowledged or not. They quietly set upper and lower limits. They define what feels safe enough. When constraints tighten, the ceiling lowers. When dependencies increase, acceptable downside shrinks. The internal signal adjusts accordingly. Because the adjustment feels internal, you treat it as personal truth. You defend it as identity. You rationalize it as principle. In reality, it is structural feedback. It is a measurement of exposure relative to obligation. It is shaped by what you stand to lose and who depends on that stability. Past constraints created the initial calibration. Current dependencies continuously update it. Together, they manufacture what you call tolerance. The more invisible the shaping forces are, the more authentic the feeling seems. You trust it because it feels yours. You rarely question its architecture. But once you recognize that comfort with risk is conditioned, the perception changes. The sensation remains, yet its authority weakens. You begin to see that caution and boldness are not fixed virtues. They are contextual outputs. They respond to structure. Perceived comfort with risk is quietly shaped by past constraints and current dependencies. It is not an isolated personality trait. It is a reflection of where you have been and what you are currently tied to. It is a product of structure more than will. Understanding this does not eliminate fear or expand bravery. It clarifies the source of the signal. It separates identity from environment. And when identity loosens, structure becomes visible. What felt innate reveals its conditioning. What felt personal reveals its architecture. Risk tolerance was never entirely yours. It was assembled around you. Want to see the hidden rules shaping money, power, and human behavior? Subscribe to Unseen Forces,